They say the Arctic is a place of endless white, a land where silence reigns supreme. They lie. The Arctic has 1,000 whispers, 1,000 unseen eyes. But sometimes it screams. This is the story of Elias Island, a sliver of rock and frozen earth, barely worthy of a name, adrift in the brutal northern sea. For 10 months a year, it's a ghost, a desolate monument to isolation. Its only residents, lichen, a few very confused seagulls, and the occasional polar bear with a terrible sense of direction. It's the kind of place you forget existence till it becomes the epicenter of a biological apocalypse. It began with a whisper, then a flurry of strange, hushed emails, a clandestine operation dubbed Project Warren. The goal, simple, yet utterly insane, to introduce a new, vibrant life into an overly predictable ecosystem. The means, a cargo plane, a handful of very well-paid, ethically flexible biologists, and a staggering number of Arctic hares, not 10, not 100, but 250,000. 250,000 magnificent, white-furred, and utterly bewildered bundles of pure, concentrated fluff. They landed them on Elias Island, just as the first unforgiving gales of October began to blow. A grand, catastrophic joke played on nature. The kind of thing that makes you chuckle nervously while you check the locks on your front door. The official reasoning. A population dynamics study. But we knew the real, dark truth. This wasn't science. This was a spectacle. Picture the scene. 250,000 hares. They're fast, they're resourceful, and they are hungry. Released onto a landmass equipped to sustain perhaps a few dozen. At first, it was a dizzying, beautiful spectacle. A living, moving snowdrift. Imagine stepping onto the island and feeling the very ground quiver beneath your boots. A carpet of twitching noses and enormous, worried eyes. The footage from the drop-off is the sheer, overwhelming scale is what gets you. In the short term, they were fine. They were bred in captivity. They were robust. They devoured every scrap of edible flora in 2 days flat. The island went from muted green brawn to a stark, uniform gray. That's when the hunger started to settle in. A deep, biological panic that began to override every instinct except survival. Remember that old joke? What do you call 1,000,000 rabbits marching across a field? The punchline suddenly felt less funny. We were about to find out. The sun began to dip, staying lower and lower on the horizon. The promise of the eternal Arctic night, the Kamos, was coming, and as the darkness grew, so did the tension. The hares stopped scattering. They started, gathering. In the fading light, the colony, once a chaotic, vibrant mass, became a silent, single entity. A colossal, pulsating body of white fur and sharpened intent. Dr. Aristhorn, the project's lead, a man whose ambition clearly outweighed his common sense, wrote his final log entry before the blizzard hit. It read simply, "The noise is not the problem. It is the absolute absence of it. They watch, they wait. They are unified." The blizzard hit with the speed and brutality of a hammer blow. For 3 days, Elias Island was sealed off, invisible under a churning, white rage. But the storm was just a distraction. The real horror was unfolding beneath the snow. Line hares, unlike many animals, don't hibernate. They endure, and 250,000 enduring hares, confined to a small, resource-depleted space, quickly become an architectural force. They didn't just dig burrows, they tunneled. Driven by instinct and desperation, they began to hollow out the soft, frozen earth, creating a vast, unstable labyrinth beneath the thin crust of the tundra, a subterranean city built on starvation. When the storm finally lifted, the sight was profoundly disturbing. The island's topography had changed. It looked deflated, pockmarked with thousands of tiny, perfectly round breathing holes. But the hares themselves were gone. Where once there was a blinding white carpet of frantic life, there was only the wind-scoured snow and an unnerving, absolute silence. This is where the story gets truly unsettling. The rescue team, arriving a week later, found the research station intact, but abandoned. No bodies, no signs of struggle. Just a single, neatly stacked pile of field equipment outside the main door. And then, there was the audio log recovered from Dr. Thorne's personal recorder. The final entry, time-stamped 3 a.m. on the 4th day. The cold is immaterial. The wind is irrelevant. What matters is the sound. It began as a vibration, low, steady. I realized they weren't running from anything. They were running together. In a rhythm, a single, colossal drumbeat. They were marshalling. The truth they couldn't grasp was simple, yet chilling. The hares hadn't vanished. They had gone vertical. The ground was saturated, weakened by their endless tunneling, and the first significant snowfall had just arrived. A tiny, isolated, biological experiment had met a spectacular, geological conclusion. The 250,000 hares had created the perfect conditions for the most absurd, yet terrifying, natural disaster, the Great Arctic Hare Avalanche. Elias Island was never meant to hold such a massive, concentrated weight of desperation. As the sheer mass of hares shifted and organized in their underground network, The frozen crust of the tundra gave way, not in a spectacular movie-style collapse, but in a slow, sickening slump. It was a massive, silent landslip of earth, ice, and 250,000 panicked mammals, all cascading down the island's gentle slope toward the frigid sea. The team confirmed it with drone footage, a colossal, churning landslide of biological matter and permafrost, disappearing into the ocean's black depths. A disaster both pathetic and terrifying. The punchline to a dark, cosmic joke. So what was the lesson of Project Warren? That nature, when overpopulated, is capable of unimaginable, strangely bureaucratic cruelty. That science should maybe, just maybe, leave the tiny, remote tundra islands alone. Perhaps, but here's the unsettling thought that lingers, the one that keeps the surviving biologists awake at night. They were released just before the water started to freeze. The hares were designed to survive. The official record calls it a tragedy. But we know better. It was an awakening. Because when the ice bridge to the mainland finally formed that December, the island was empty, completely unnervingly empty. And on the shores of the nearby coast, footprints were found. Thousands of them, small, synchronized, heading south. They didn't run, they marched. And somewhere, out there, in the endless white, 250,000 hungry, unified, and very quiet creatures are waiting for spring. The ice is melting. The Arctic hares are moving. You've heard the whispers. Now, you need the proof. Do you think they're coming for us? Subscribe and hit the notification bell to witness the full, terrifying saga of Project Warren. The full documentary drops this Friday. Don't be left in the dark.